What's the most fricked up thing a family member of yours has done? NSW. My grandfather had my grandma change her will to cut out my mom 2 years after my grandma had developed full-blown dementia. If your mother had decided to fight that one in court, she likely would have won. There's a reason why wills tend to mention being of sound mind. Last week my mother and sister were visiting. Fear both pieces of work, but they've never done anything that crappy. One day I go out shopping with my sister, who is 13, and we got talking about her dad, my former stepdad. When we stopped by a candy store, I tell her, don't you hate it when Jason, her dad, takes his tax? My sister looked at me really funny and asked me to elaborate. I tell her about how he used to demand 15% of everything I got when I was living with my parents while they were married. 15% of my Halloween candy. 15% of my money from my lemonade stand when I was 9. 15% of my tip and wage from my waitressing job when I was 18 on top of paying rent. About $700 a month. He even demanded my food when I made dinner. I have specific allergies, so I needed to eat separate food from my family. These aren't the only things he's done, but they're the most cheap. My sister was shocked and I realized he had only ever done it to me. It was quite jarring to realize I was the only one he was targeting. My brother stole $500 from my mom yesterday while we were away. She pays his car insurance and has looked the other way when he's taken stuff before, but this was her final straw. I had a cousin who was addicted to H and his parents were always doing stuff to bail him out and keep him from being homeless. One time they put down a deposit and paid rent for a furnished apartment for him. He ended up selling the furniture for drug money. Another time they rented a mobile home for him and couldn't figure out why the water bill was so high. Turns out he was charging his homeless friends $1 to take a bath shower, and that was going on pretty much around the clock. Mobile home bathhouse. I'm imagining a line out the door, lol. Not as bad as some of things on this thread, but this was a dong move. I asked my uncle, who is a mechanic, if he could install new belt on my Honda since it would be much cheaper than taking it to a shop. He told me he would do it for me. I just had to buy the parts. Bought the parts, took the car to him and came back a few hours later. He told me he was finished and I paid him $200 for a $450 job, which was dope. A few days later my cousin texts me a picture of some parts that his dad asked him to put on eBay. They were all the parts that he said he installed on my car. My cousin thought they may be from me since he knew what job his dad was doing for me. I called my uncle and he denied it firmly. I still had the receipt and matched the barcodes to the ones on my receipt, so they were clearly mine. My cousin, who is also a mechanic, installed them for free for me a week later. Uncle still denies it and kept my $200. Don't talk to that pleb anymore even if he's around at family gatherings. At least your cousin sounds like a good guy. One of my uncles borrowed $20,000 from my other more successful uncle to start a business and refuses to pay his more successful brother back because he's got so much money already. The more successful uncle refuses to sue him because that's not what family does, but they are no longer on speaking terms. One of my uncles is out of the family now for this. Borrowed from our great grandmother, declared bankruptcy, then said, I don't have to pay her back. I declared bankruptcy, disowned immediately. Frick that guy. My grandmother had 5 sisters. They were all super close. One of them got cancer. This was in the 1960s. They all decided not to tell the daughter, who was 12 at the time of the sick one, that her mother was dying because her father had just died a couple months prior. So the daughter just woke up one day and the mother had died. I mean, it's not completely fricked up, but it was a bad decision, I feel. My brother threatened to kick in my front door and kill me. 6 mo pregnant, my husband and 2-year-old son. He had stolen the phone I had purchased for my dad and I turned it off. He wanted me to turn it back on. M is bad, kids. I have no aunts or uncles anymore because of M. It's literally ruined my entire extended family who were mostly successful medical or education professionals. All I have is my immediate family. My aunt didn't remember which of my 3 brothers I am. M is terrible, kids. My cousin killed his brother and father. He got up one morning, had a glass of milk, I guess it was soured, because he said they were trying to poison him. He shot my uncle in his bed and then went after Robert. When police arrived, he tried to say that Robert had killed his father and that he took the gun away from him and killed him in self-defense. However, the only place on the gun they could find Robert's prints were on the end of the gun barrel, like he had tried to push it away. He is currently doing life without parole in the Oklahoma prison system. If anyone wants, I will link you to his prison page and the articles from the shooting. This sounds like a case of mental disorder to me. My aunt married a guy a few years back. He was a pathological liar and lied about literally everything for no reason. Tried to convince everyone he was in the military black ops and that there was no record of him because it was secret. He also did a lot of other fricked up stuff like threatening our family members and friends and other things. He actually even tried to kill my uncle and my 2 cousins, but got his butt properly beat down with a baseball bat. Long story short, my aunt ended up divorcing him later cause he was an all-around freaking C, and he came to her house, rang the doorbell, then shot himself in the head with a handgun right on her doorstep. Real fricked up. Well, I have an uncle who always beat his wife, so on one occasion she got into her car and ran him over multiple times. Broken leg, foot, ribs, collarbone, etc. He ended up staying at my dad's house for something like 9 months while he recovered. They got back together. He told her, "Well, you finally got me back, you B." Jesus. That's almost like a true love story. I was abusive right up until she ran me over a couple times. Love that B. A cousin of mine put a switchblade to my throat when I was about 8 to scare the crap out of me. It worked, almost literally. This happened to me as well, but not to my throat, just out menacingly. He claimed if he stabbed me he couldn't get caught because our bloodline was the same. Young me was quite terrified. My cousin went on to serve time for various crimes. My cousin tried choking me to death when I was like 6. He also loosened the bolts and put me coffee table, told me to lay under it, and hit it so it fell on me. Killed the nerves in my 2 front teeth and had to get them pulled out. But now that fat bastard can't walk and has to wear diapers while spiraling into depression. So it all turned out well in the end. My sister who ran away from home once put my cat in the refrigerator when she was in high school. What kind of psycho crap? Not a family member, but my sister's ex-fiance really charmed everyone in the beginning. We thought he was the sweetest southern gentleman you've ever met. Fast forward a year later, he got my sister into drugs. They lost all their money and moved in with my mom. He would abuse my sister and my mom. My mom wasn't really a hoarder, but she had a lot of things in her home. This man was a neat freak, so while my mom would be at work, he would clean out the house by throwing her belongings into the trash can outside and setting it on fire. These belongings included my late father's things that were sentimental, like his clothes. Also any and all picture albums of our family growing up. He threw away and burned everything. I have no pictures of my dad or myself from when I was younger anymore. We had 2 dogs. One was a German Shepherd from when my dad was alive and one Chihuahua we adopted. He took the Chihuahua and threw her out the window on the side of the road. He let the Shepherd loose out of the house and called animal control about a stray dog. I think that hurt the worst because we had those dogs for years. My mom loved him in the beginning, so she gave him my father's wedding ring because they were going to marry. He pawned that for money. He also sold my laptop for drugs. I blamed my sister for everything for a long time. I let her borrow rent money once, but little did I know that she was going to use it for drugs. She ended up leaving him, but they do have a beautiful child together. That's the only good thing about the whole situation. He is and always will be a monster. God dang. That's freaking nuts. My dad bought his 2 brothers a house in India to live in. Both have 2 kids, so it's a pretty big family, so a pretty big house. All he asked for return was to leave one of the rooms open for us so that when we go to visit, we have a room to call our own. Less than 2 months after buying them this house, they tore down the room and both took parts of it to remodel and make it into their own. When my dad went to visit a year later, they wouldn't let him into the house and tried to give him $50 to go stay in a hotel. Both of these families are pretty scum. One of the kids stole my grandma's jewelry and sold it for drug money. They also collectively stole my great uncle's pension checks and gave him nothing. They put him in a small room in the attic even though he begged them for a bottom floor room because it was so hard for him to walk. Another son stole a visitor's wallet then threw it onto the neighbor's yard. In India most houses have roofs that are open and connected. Cops were called. It was a huge thing but in the end nothing could be proved. One of the sons basically stole a store from his cousin. The cousin's family owned this small novelty shop. The son worked there for a long time. The family that owned it went away for vacation for a week and when they returned all the locks were changed. Cops came and couldn't do crap because the paperwork for the shops was misfiled originally and the family didn't technically own the deed. They couldn't afford a lawyer to fight the case. My family hasn't talked to these two brothers and their families in a few years. I went to India a month ago and heard of all these stories from other family members. There is also a pending case where my dad owns a plot in India that we think the brother's family is using to do some fricked up crap. My dad hasn't been to India in 7 years because he is just so sad to visit because of this crap. The funny thing is that my dad would have done anything for them if they didn't frick around and steal so much. They both would have been so much better off if they weren't such scum. Sounds like a Punjabi family. Family drama is Punjabi families can be insane. My sisters used to pretend to put me in the oven. Apparently, I was only about 3 at the time. I don't remember. They put mine in a wok and seasoned me. My sister lied to a social worker to have us investigated for child abuse and neglect, leading to our foster child being removed from our home even though the claims were found to be false. She also spread the gossip that we were being investigated, which hurt some friendships. That foster child she got removed. Not only did she mess up that baby's life, she also destroyed my other kids because one day their sibling was home and the next gone with no warning. We had prepared them for foster kids leaving, but this foster child was within weeks of being adopted by us. To this day my sister maintains that she did the right thing because we didn't need more kids. My girlfriend's cousin molested his own sister when he was 18 and she was around 8. He went to jail for a year or so and now has to register as a sex offender. His mother makes her daughter hang out with him. Seriously, the B makes her daughter hang out with the man who molested her because they are a family. What the freaking frick? Thanks guys. I've wondered what to do about this. I'll make a call tomorrow. My grandmother said she needed a place to stay one night due to issues with her housemate. She slept on the couch for the next 10 years. Made no effort to get her own place despite having a very good retirement income and still working part-time as a nurse. Loved to hit the casino though. You should have told her to GTFO after year 1. Or at least help her out. For example, pay first month's rent on a cheap apartment. My family is a fricked up collection of people, but one of my cousins is the soap opera star of white trash. My cousin married his dealer, promptly got her pregnant, resulting in her 6th kid. The first 5 had been taken away by the state and were being raised by her parents. Within a year of the baby being born, they get into a drunken fight. Cousin's wife tries to drive away with baby. They drunkenly physically fight over the baby as she tries to get her in the car, and the car door gets slammed into baby's torso, breaking 2 of her ribs. Cops come. Wife has sobered up and cousin hasn't. She blames the fight on him, not revealing how badly the baby is hurt. Cousin gets arrested. 3 hours later she gets arrested driving drunk. Baby in the car. They discover the broken ribs. Baby get taken away. Her parents couldn't take another kid, so the baby ended up getting adopted by one of my uncles and is now 10 years old and healthy. My cousin and his wife are still legally married but separated. He wants to move across the country, but he's still on parole and can't leave the state. Last I heard, his wife has had 2 more kids, both from different fathers. The state has 1, and her oldest son has taken custody of the other. As soon as he turned 18 he got custody of 3 of his siblings to help his aging grandparents out. My cousin is still an addict, off M, but still a raging alcoholic. He lives in a tent on various family members' backyards, and I avoid him since he is still welcome at family gatherings where his biological daughter is also present. If this is ever mentioned in his hearing, he has 40,000 reasons why it's not his fault at all. He has stolen from all my aunts and uncles for drug money, sexually creeped out me and every other cousin over the age of 15. caused serious personal property damage with a fire, and my family insists on sweeping it under the rug every time. During my father-in-law's unexpected sickness and death, my brother-in-law got greedy. While my wife was staying with my Phil at the hospital, my Bill proceeded to loot my Phil of as many of his earthly possessions as he could load up, and took it all to his house. My wife has never been allowed to go through these personal possessions. After moving my Phil to hospice, to cover his tracks, my Bill proceeded to tell the entire family that I had stolen large amounts of money from my Phil. There was no truth to this whatsoever in any shape, form or fashion. And in fact, after my Phil's death, my Bill embezzled the estate fund's $50K from the account. My wife ended up suing him and he had to return half. This act tore the family apart, all because of greed. It's been 6 years and I think about it every day, still. I'm dreading to see the fight that will ensue when my in-laws pass. My two Sills will both be horrible. Mind you, they both have more money than they will ever need, but dang, you'd think they are going to starve to death tomorrow. My dad's a consummate prankster. His crowning achievement, in college, has since become illegal in 2 states. Step 1. He and several buddies go to a Cadillac dealership at 5 o'clock on a Friday. This was before credit cards and automatic banking. BTW. Step 2. They wrote a check for the asking price of one of the shiny new models, and drove off with it. Step 3. They sell the car at a used Cadillac dealership across town. Step 4. The used dealer calls the new dealer, and tells him that the car was sold with the dealer plates still on, and the price tag still in the window. Step 5. New dealer figures that the check the kids wrote is going to bounce, so he calls the cops. Step 6. My dad and his friends spend the weekend in jail. Step 7. The bank's open Monday morning. The check doesn't bounce. Step 8. My dad and his friends sue the dealers and the state for wrongful imprisonment, and get a settlement of thousands of dollars more than the cost of the car. Basically, the plan was to seem as shady as possible and get wrongfully arrested for it. They had the lawyer set up before they bought the car. Dad used his share to pay for his, and another friend's, tuition for the year. The state passed legislation protecting themselves from this kind of thing within the month, and the state to the immediate north adopted the law as well. 30 years later. Holy crap, that's like legitimately genius. My mom married a convinced child molester and would bring him with her to work, a job where there were unsupervised children. Grandparents on my dad's side passed away and left me, my brother and my cousin £20,000 each in a trust fund to be given to each of us as we turned 21. I was the first, and my father refused to give it to me. I should mention at this point my parents are divorced, so my dad lives elsewhere, as apparently I hadn't earned it. Fine, whatevs. Then my brother turned 21 last year, and again refused to give it to him. But since my brother is a hard-working individual, the haven't earned it excuse wouldn't fly, thus he revealed he had in fact spent all of our money paying off debts he owed for reason unbeknownst to us. Neither of us have spoken to him since then, even though he has tried once to contact me via Facebook. He claims he was within his legal right to do this. By the way, we took it up with a solicitor and it turns out no, he wasn't. It's fraud. Unfortunately, our family doesn't have the money to take him to court, so not much we can do. Oh, and to top off this crap pie, my cousin turned 21 earlier this year and his father, my uncle, has pulled the same stunt my father has. Truly wonderful men. My sister talked my ex-husband into suing me for full custody at the exact moment I was unable to contest it properly because I had just suffered a huge loss at month 9 of my pregnancy. She also farded his case with lies to make me look like a terrible mother, while simultaneously patting me on the back and consoling me that he was a terrible man. He didn't win, but the case made things contentious for us for years and made it impossible to grieve with my now husband, because I was in survival mode to make sure I didn't lose my daughter. How horrendously crappy. I'm sorry this happened to you. After reading some of these, I've realized mine isn't so bad. But my uncle is Cecil Russell. A lot of what he's done is public, but he's done so many more terrible things. The two big ones are that when he was still just my aunt's swimming coach, when she was a teenager, mind you, he got her pregnant and destroyed her shot at the Olympics. He also participated in the murder of a man over steroids, something he continues to sell to this day, but was only ever charged with hiding the body. My mother told my younger brother that his father killed himself in jail. Not only did he never go to jail, he's still alive. She's a real crap bag. While suffering from postpartum depression, my mother set me on fire when I was 26 days old. We don't have a relationship, but that's from the rest of my childhood, not this. Postpartum is brutal. My mom, already not the most mentally stable individual, not crazy, just has depression and anxiety, got slapped with it hard when my younger brother was born. My grandma ended up taking me and him for a month-long visit to her house so my dad, who's thankfully a doctor, could get her some help. Thankfully, she was still an awesome mom afterwards, just on Cymbalta. So tough to decide. There's my grandmother who divorced my grandfather and married his brother, making her my great aunt. There's the other grandmother who showed up to my grandfather's funeral drunk, dressed like a $2 prostitute, cussed out the family, and nearly knocked the casket over. There's the 3 convicted child molesters, and then dozen non-convicted child molesters because it was a different time then and that kind of thing was kept in the family. There's the stepfather that tried to murder my pregnant mother. There's the cousin who shot himself in front of his kids. There's the guy who was caught fricking a goat. There's the guy who would give his kids booze on fishing trips to keep them quiet. All the kids were 5 and under. My sister, then 7 years old, tried to kill our newborn brother because she was jealous. So, take your pick on which one is the most fricked up thing. Hey Uncle Father Oscar. My dad's wife told me that he was dead when he wasn't. I only found out months later when a relative said he'd recently had an operation and was doing well. I emailed her and said I believe dad has perked up a bit. She didn't respond. My uncles came by the house after my father died, got my mother, their sister, drunk, and then took a lot of my father's things with her drunken permission. Things that were meant for my brother and me. Those bastards. I never speak to them anymore for that reason. Got early Alzheimer's father to sign a loan putting the house up, then purposefully defaulted, resulting in mother to be evicted. Mother and father ended up in separate homes, and died a year apart. Took all the insurance money and left the grave without a stone. Special place in heck. I don't know why, but this is the one that made me cry. Poor old couple. My father, who didn't want me and tried to get my mom to get an abortion, used to kidnap me and try to leave state with me while also trying to brainwash me into loving him. He never paid his child support, but when he did he'd come pick me up for the weekend and would drive as fast and as far as he could until my stepmother would catch on and stop him. The entire trip out he'd tell me about how my mother has never loved me, no one has, no one will, and that everyone in the family tries really hard to forget me and the horrible shame I brought on the family for being a bastard. He would tell me all about how my mom was a 40-year virgin who was terrible in bed, how she should be lucky he allowed her to have his child, how I should be so lucky that I look like him and not like a dirty beaner like my mom. Which never made sense to me. She's Native American, not Mexican, and he knew that, so I never understood the racist comments because I didn't know what a beaner was at the time. He'd also scream about how much he hated me and wished he could take my birth back, but then he'd turn around and say I was the love of his life and that no one will ever love me as much as he does because he is my dad, so I have to love him. Found out many years later that it was the H&M talking. For many reasons I never told my mom about these trips and she never found out. My mum started bleeding badly when she was 8ish months pregnant with my sister. Dad refused to take her to hospital. Sister died. My mum was diagnosed with leukemia. Dad went for sole custody. Mum passed. Dad moves in with her maid of honor, my mum's best friend of 30 years, who was executor of her estate. Proceeded to drain what my mum had put aside for me. Eldest brother was looking at incest P and my dad hit me for telling on him. As the sole female sibling in the house, I was terrified, but apparently it's just what boys do. Force me to sleep in a room alone with said brother for weeks to prove nothing would happen. Things happened. Father stabbed me in the ankle when I was 9. Kicked me out when I was 14. Lied about my other brother dying. Went so far as to put a plaque up on the tree he had supposedly crashed into. Eventually found out brother was alive. Father said he was hoping the incident would be enough for me to kill myself. When he kicked me out of home he told my entire family he was hoping I would get raped. I did. So twice my father put me in positions where I would be sexually assaulted. There's more, but suffice it to say, when I had my daughter I swore I would never be anything like him. And I'm not. I freaking won. You did win. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.